Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where life moves pretty fast. And if we don't stop to look around every once in a while, we might miss it. Today
true.
we're talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if you hadn't understood that from, the quote that everybody says on this movie.
Or if you didn't see the episode title.
Or if you didn't see the episode title. Yeah, there are several ways to figure that out. But yeah, that's today's film to remember. Joining me as usual are my co-hosts Jeff Grizz Ulrich.
Hello.
And Josh Bradley, who's joining us from Vegas this week.
Hello, hi, hello, live from Vegas. Well, live for you two, not live for anybody listening to this right now.
How you doing, Josh?
Tired, but great.
And Grizz?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm having a fantastic weekend. And, of course, made all the better by having watched Ferris Bueller.
Absolutely. We'll get into that, actually. That's actually my take on the movie is like, oh, I was in a shitty mood and this made it better.
Nice.
Before we get into this week's film to remember, we have leftover business from, I guess, 2 weeks ago. I watched Chinatown. Last week I was too busy, I didn't get to it, but this week I did watch it. So the first thing that we're going to do is rank Chinatown on our film to remember list.
The long-awaited ranking has arrived.
Long-awaited ranking of Chinatown. So I'm just going to remind you of the top 10, assuming it's going to get in it, and it is, spoilers. At number 10 we have Ansandi, 9 we have Sound of Metal, 8 The Wind Rises, 7 The Departed, 6 Your Name, 5 The Thing, 4 Ladder di Biciclette or Bicycle Thieves, 3 Network, 2 Boogie Nights, and number 1 we have Citizen Kane. Remind me where you guys put this movie?
Well, so before we had Bicycle Thieves on there, I believe
Yes.
I had it...
You go to number 8.
I had it number 8
So it would be...
before, so now it would be number 9.
Number 9, okay.
I had it above Sound of Metal.
Okay. And Josh, you had it at number 1, right?
I had it number 1.
With a bullet.
Better than all these movies.
Okay, so I'll just briefly... I watched the movie this week, at the beginning of the week, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. In its genre, I think the script was the major standout of the film. Like, the writing is just amazing from beginning to end.
I agree.
Performances are awesome. I know the ending, you guys were talking about the ending as like one of the iconic endings in film history, and I agree, although at the same time it kind of, I don't know, I haven't digested it yet. I'm still conflicted on how I feel about it, which I guess to some extent means that it's really effective. Because it is
Maybe we should wait for you to digest it before we rank it then.
I mean, It's been a week. No, it's been a week. Jesus Christ. So I'm not okay. I really enjoyed the movie. I wasn't completely blown away by it as I thought I might be, but I still think it's absolutely fantastic, and I would rank it pretty high. Looking at our list, I just going off of the list, I would probably put it at number 4, so above Bicycle Thieves, below Network. And since I'm splitting the vote, I guess that's where
it goes.
Putting it, right? So yeah.
Remember, it moves up the rankings until 2 people are no longer voting for it to continue up the rankings. That's how the ranking is decided.
We explain it every week, and it never makes sense, so it's fine.
So hold on. If, hypothetically speaking, you both want something at like number 12, and I want it at number 1, the fact that I want it at 1 and not 8 doesn't give it any more weight to its ranking?
Correct.
That's a good point.
Let me voice my opinion that this is dumb.
Well,
it's hard to do that. And to
I
be
suppose
fair, like, if
the reason we were doing it that way was because it's easier to do it live. Like, we don't have to average things out. It's just when someone stops voting for it, then like, that's it. I think. But if we want to average it out, we're smart guys. We can average out 3 numbers.
I think when we get to 30, we should do the re-ranking. Whenever we get to 30, that'll be the episode where the next week we'll do the episode where we re-rank the list, and that's where we're going to assign points for each movie. And we're just going to make the list based on our actual, like, factual preferences.
So keep watching, because we're going to fix it.
So keep watching. We'll get to it. Okay, so that's Chinatown ranked. So let's jump into our film to remember for this week, which is Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Woo!
Just before we get into the movie, this is one of the iconic teen/high school movies of all time. And I just wanted to ask you guys very quickly what your thoughts are on this genre and why it's so, why it's so enduring and why, it seems like every generation has its own group of teen movies that represent that generation, and why the genre has maintained its value over time. And, what are some of your favorites in it?
What makes the genre so appealing and enduring? I think that it's a universal experience. It's a universal experience, even if your experience is different than what you see on screen. I think, like, just a lot of you're young, you're feeling your feelings very strongly, so everything seems very heightened and intense. And so I think a good high school movie can make that come across. And also, like, I think I can point to some movies that, again, even though I didn't grow up in the 80s, there's still stuff I relate to in these 80s high school movies, like in The Breakfast Club, when you think that, like, you're a weirdo and no one else is like you, and you think that your classmates are so different from you.
Yeah.
That's not usually the case. You fall in love hard in high school, or at least I tended to, and I think a lot of kids tend to, because, again, you feel your feelings hard, so, any high school romance movies feel heightened and that kind of thing. So, Grizz, what do you like about the genre?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of what Josh said here for me as well. It's a universal experience. Well, almost universal experience.
Yeah.
Even if you don't go to a high school, or specifically an American high school, you're still going to have been 16 years old, and there are some life experiences that are shared by everybody, even if you're not realizing that you're sharing those. So that's why it has that universal appeal. Also, I think it's just a little bit of fun, right? It's a popcorn genre, for the most part. Obviously, there's some high school movies that get a little heavy at times, but for the most part, it's enjoying a flick with your family or your friends, and laughing at some situations that we can all relate to. And so I think that's why the genre is so appealing overall. As far are we also talking about our favorites in this genre right now?
I mean, yeah, we can.
Yeah,
we can throw out some favorites.
Now, obviously, Ferris Bueller came out before I was even born, but Ferris Bueller is one of my favorites in this genre. But others in the high school genre, I like Mean Girls a lot. I like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Other ones that are less comedies, like Perks of Being a Wallflower, is one of my favorite movies. And Donnie Darko. I don't know if you want to classify that as. I mean, it's a high school movie, but
no, that's a good call. That's a good call for sure.
I mean, Twin Peaks is high school to some extent, kinda.
About half of it, yeah.
There's also like prostitution and drug running and stuff, but there's also high school.
Yeah, high school.
That's part of high school. So for me, like, obviously, I'm not American, and but there's a part of, aside from the universality of the feelings that you feel at that age that you guys talked about, there's something about high school movies that has always been interesting to me as kind of a sociological experiment, like just seeing how completely different this world that teenagers live in is. Like the way sports doesn't exist. Like, for example, in Italy, all sports is completely separate from school. We don't really do sport in school in that way. We don't have, like, it's stupid. We don't have lockers. We don't have, a class that you go to have a class. You have one class, you don't leave it for the whole morning, and, then school ends at 1:00 for lunch and you go home. Like, it's completely different. And I don't know, it's always been fun and entertaining to me to notice all those small differences and see, oh, look at these weird Americans with all their lingo that I don't understand. But it's fun. It's always been fun. And, I think they make for some of the most relatable films that you can make, because it's something that everyone has experienced, as you said.
What are some of your favorites, Hugo?
Yeah, as far as my favorites, I think my favorites are a little more recent. It might just be because of, I didn't grow up with a lot of teen movies for some reason.
You were watching Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill.
Yeah. It's
Kill Bill when you're
weird.
9 years old. Yeah,
I had a weird childhood in terms of movie watching. So I think some favorites for me are films like Booksmart, came out a few years ago. We talked about it on the podcast.
I deliberately didn't say that when I was shouting out once, because I knew you were going to shout it out.
Fair, yeah, really like it. Ladybird is another film. It's kind of on the cusp of being more of a drama, but still great little movie. Ferris Bueller is a movie that I really, really liked, especially the second time around watching it for this podcast. Another one that I want to throw out is like Spider-Man Homecoming is essentially a high school comedy, but it just happens to star Spider-Man, and it's really good.
Which is such a great concept.
Yeah, it's really cool. Juno, Easy A, there's a bunch of fun ones. So yeah, let's get into the movie.
Josh, did you share your favorites?
If you want.
Shout out a couple ones you guys said. I love Donnie Darko. Great idea calling that a high school movie. I don't really think of it in that way, but absolutely is.
I mean, it is, yeah.
I love Booksmart. I love Ladybird. I love Mean Girls, like you guys said. I'm also going to shout out Superbad.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I absolutely love Superbad. And I think this will come up again later, but Breakfast Club. Mm-hmm. I also want to shout out in the Hughes pantheon.
For sure. So, jumping into the movie, I'll just give out some boilerplate stuff for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The film was released in June of 1986 on a budget of around 6 million and made a box office return of 71 million. I'm not sure if this is just North America or worldwide, but it's still
worldwide.
Pretty good return.
It's actually kind of both. Like I think it made 70 million domestic and 71 worldwide. It didn't. Yeah, it didn't do much.
That happens with this kind of movie, especially.
Yes.
At that time.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. The film was written and directed by John Hughes, who famous for a lot of comedies and especially teen comedies in the 80s. Who apparently wrote Skipped in less than a week, just 6 days.
That's just entirely aggravating to me. I've written screenplays before, and writing a script this good in 6 days is just I want to walk into the ocean.
Well, this isn't the only time that he's written a screenplay in an incredibly short amount of time, right? Didn't he also write Home Alone in an incredibly short amount of time?
Yeah, he was a notorious. He was ruthlessly efficient with his writing. Notoriously speaking, yeah. This is the only time.
Reading up on this movie specifically, he said in interviews and stuff, he said that he wanted the film to be focused on the characters rather than the plot itself. So he had a basic outline for the plot and who the characters were, and he just kind of wrote vignettes, little stories within that kind of basic plot. So the film was very much composed with individual scenes or sequences that you can kind of mix and match. And apparently the first edit of the movie was almost 3 hours long, because it's all set during a day, so they don't have costume changes or anything. So they were kind of moving scenes back and forth depending on how they wanted to structure the movie at the end. And then eventually, of course, they cut it down to I think it's an hour and 40 minutes or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, he had this basic idea for the story, some thematic through lines, and the story of, we'll get into it, but the story of the dean searching for him is the only part of the story that was actually completely linear. The rest they kind of built in the edit room, really. The film stars Matthew Broderick as Ferris Bueller, Alan Ruck as his best friend Cameron Fry, Mia Sara as his girlfriend Sloane Peterson, Jeffrey Jones as Ed Rooney, the Dean of Students, who's hilarious in this movie, and Jennifer Grey of what's that movie called?
Dirty Dancing.
As Jeannie Bueller, the sister. Basic plot premise for the film: Ferris Bueller is a high school kid who fakes being sick to skip school. He then kind of gets his friend Cameron, who's it's unclear whether he's sick or just depressed, but he gets him out of bed, and together they manage to sneak out the girlfriend character Sloane out of school in an hilarious sequence that I'm sure we'll talk about. And the three of them kind of take Cameron's dad's car, and they go to have a trip to downtown Chicago and spend the rest of the day there, having fun. Not being in school for once.
Yeah.
The day off.
Yeah.
Everyone at school in the meantime, and kind of in the local community, there's this through line joke that everyone is raising awareness for Ferris Bueller, believing that he's really sick and he needs a transplant or whatever. People send him flowers at home, and it's really funny. And meanwhile, Mr. Rooney, who's the dean of the students at the school, knows that Ferris is actually skipping school, and he does everything to try to catch him in the act. And this little movie within the movie of him doing kind of a detective thing, trying to figure out how Ferris managed to skip school and to catch him in the act. So I think that's the basic, plot of the film. We'll get into we'll get into further plot stuff later. So first of all, what do you guys think of this movie? Just give me your basic thoughts.
Grizz?
As I said before, this is one of my favorites in this genre, and I absolutely love this movie. It's fun, start to finish. There's maybe if I had any complaint, it's that sometimes things are a little overacted, but it's a comedy, so like I'm not that broken up about it, And basically, the only scenes where the overacting thing like bothers me is when he's with his parents in the beginning. And they're like, he's basically talking goo goo gaga to his mom and dad, and they're like, "Oh, son, you're just the swellest." that stuff feels a little cheesy, but I kind of love how cheesy it is. I kind of love how cheesy it is.
Like it's cheesy, but I think it fits the overall point of view of the movie, where it always shows like these teenagers as super smart people, and all the adults are like bumbling idiots.
Dumb.
So
I don't think they're dumb. I think you guys aren't giving them the appropriate amount of credit because the way that scene plays out, like we see things that they don't. They don't see him winking at his sister, which is fine. But I don't know. I love that like. The camera, when it shows the parents, the camera's like from Ferris' point of view. So like the parents are looking down lovingly at us.
Yeah.
And it's nice. I think it's nice.
It is nice.
I don't think they're bumbling. I think they're just caring and, maybe a little too willing to trust everything that Ferris says, but doesn't make them dumb.
No. I'm not saying dumb, but they're certainly, like, I think the whole movie is certainly, portrayed from the point of view of the teens.
And the teens are portrayed as more observant than... the adults for the most part.
They're not necessarily more observant than the adults. They're only more observant than the adults are willing to give them credit for.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a big difference.
Okay.
Yes,
so, and I think that's why this movie works is because your main characters are constantly underestimated, and then they constantly prove themselves, which I think is satisfying to watch.
I also think it works because Ferris Bueller's the coolest person ever. Like,
yes,
he embodies cool. And you can understand why everyone in this school loves Ferris, except for his sister.
But again, that opening scene kind of defends her hatred of him.
Yeah.
Like I watched the first half hour of this with John Hughes' commentary track on earlier this week because I've already seen this movie. I don't know as much as I've seen any movie ever, so I don't really need to watch it to be able to talk about it on a podcast. And during his commentary track for the opening scene, he said, like, the reason we have this here and the reason Jeannie witnesses him faking out the parents is so that we can give him this moment of, like, winking at his sister and doing the shh sign to his sister to, like, give her incentive to be pissed off that he's getting away with this. Because as you guys said, it seems so obvious that he's not sick and he's just pulling the wool over his parents' eyes, and yet they buy it hook, line, and sinker. And so to her, that's so aggravating, so she needs incentive to, like, try to get him caught the rest of the day. And I think that works. That works well. She's not just like a mustache-twirling villain. She's like legitimately pissed off.
She's got a legitimate complaint.
Yeah, yes.
Rooney is the mustache-twirling villain.
Yes, he is.
So, as far as my general take on the movie, I don't know. I was going through some crap, both personally, kind of professionally, and there's stuff going on in the world that is kind of putting me in a bad mood, and I watched this movie yesterday night, and it made me happy. It just puts you in a great mood. It made me think, oh, you know what, like, yeah, the personal stuff, it'll be okay, it'll be fine. Which may be a simplistic way to look at it, but it's not that easy, I think, to do a movie that is so, I think Josh says this as well in the outline, so uncynical while still being able to be really funny. And yeah, it just has this positive energy, and it's really enjoyable. And I think just on a technical standpoint, with the music, the visuals, and the sound effects as well, I think this is way more interesting than a lot of comedies that get made, especially today.
I love the dramatic music cue when they do the phone prank on Ed Rooney and he realizes he's not talking to Ferris Bueller, and there's this, and then the bell rings as the light beeps on the phone.
Yeah,
it's on the nose, but it's a good touch. I think that's really funny.
But that's the thing that they do so well with those sound effects is, yes, it's on the nose, but it elevates the comedy, and that's,
I agree.
And we were also talking about the visuals. This movie is deceptively well shot.
Yes.
I think that it has some like really like there's some scenes where I'm just like, wow, you know, they didn't have to go this hard with the cinematography in this scene, but they did, and I freaking love it.
Yeah, they do some creative camera movements and perspectives and shots, and like they do really interesting blocking. We'll talk about it as well.
Tak Fujimoto is a cinematographer on this movie, and he shot Badlands with Terrence Malick.
Oh wow!
He shot Silence of the Lambs with Jonathan Demme. He worked with he shot Philadelphia. He worked with Demme actually throughout his career. Basically, he shot The Sixth Sense with Shyamalan and Signs, which are I think also both very well shot movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's the real deal. Like this is, you wouldn't think that a cinematographer of this caliber would be on board for Ferris Bueller, but yeah, Tak Fujimoto.
I think it definitely elevates the film beyond just being a fun comedy. That, you know.
Yeah. So my quick review of the movie is that this was my answer as my favorite movie of all time for many years. That only changed in the last 5 years ago. Did I start to say something else to answer that question? So this is a very important movie to me, and one that I've seen over and over and over again. And I'm thinking back to why that is, because like from a young age, I love this movie, and I think that might be part of it. The fact that like a 9-year-old can watch this and like find a lot of things to like about it, and a 31-year-old like I am can watch it and find a lot of things to love about it. So it's got broad appeal. You know, it's got slapstick, but also like, you know, some more, I guess, smarter comedy is maybe a disingenuous thing, but like there's a lot to like, and the humor is broad. But also, like, I'm thinking back now to movies I liked as a kid, and I think the fourth wall thing, there's probably something to that. Because, like, some of the movies I watched the most as a kid, and I don't know what this says about me, but I watched Muppet Christmas Carol over and over and over again. That has fourth wall breaks.
Fourth walls.
I watched Wayne's World over and over and over and over again. The whole premise of that movie is fourth wall breaks. And then Ferris Bueller. Like, those are 3 of my favorite movies from, like, age 10 and under. Like, I watched those over and over and over again, so... Maybe there's something to that. I'm not really sure what it is. Now I'm thinking about it, though, like, the scene where he first breaks the fourth wall and, like, says, you know, and basically gives the intro to his day and gives out the keys to faking out the parents, that kind of stuff, and, like, text appears on screen like it's an instructional video. I don't know. I love that stuff.
I
and,
do
like,
too.
as soon as that scene happens, like, the music starts kicking in and, like, there's, like, a montage and stuff. So, like, the movie starts cooking at that point, and I feel like it doesn't, like, let up the gas at all. And, like, I just get so excited when he looks at the camera and starts talking and tells you how to fake out the parents while he ties his trophy to a string so the door will be weighted and he can get the dummy in his bed to roll over when the door opens. It's just great stuff.
For me, I love that because, like, they established so early on that Ferris is really cool and well-liked by everybody.
And smart.
And smart. And you know how I'm a sucker for really smart characters. So for me, whenever he breaks the fourth wall, I'm just like, okay, Ferris, tell me how to be cool.
Yeah. Well, he has everybody eating out of his hand. His parents, everyone at school, everyone he encounters, and us. Like, Grizz, you just said, every time he talks to you, you sit up straight and you're like, okay, what do you got? Because, like, I don't know, there's something about him. He's charming, and you want to listen to him.
There's something about the fourth wall breaks that I think the timing of them is so perfect. They always know the perfect time to have him talk to the camera, or to have him just give a little tiny look to the camera. Like, they're so good.
I'm thinking of 2 instances in particular, and you're exactly right. Not spoiling anything, but at the end, when he's talking to his principal and his sister, there's a moment where he just like looks at the camera, gives a little smirk, and then looks right back to the scene. Doesn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
And then a second one I like is when Cameron says, "We didn't see anything good today," and he just like is like, "What? We," and he looks at the camera and does that, and then goes back to the scene. Again, it's always very well timed and always just the right touch, like just the right amount. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on like how crazy it is that Matthew Broderick went from like the embodiment of cool to being the embodiment of a accountant.
I don't know. I mean, like he had a career trajectory, but yeah, I kind of agree. He got typecast as the nerd pretty quickly after this.
Yeah,
I think.
I don't know how that happened.
So, if I remember right, this isn't in the outline and this isn't in research I did this week, but I just remember this from my life, is both Matthew Broderick and Alan Ruck were up for the part of Ferris Bueller. and they were in a play together. And
Biloxi Blues, right?
Yes, that sounds right. So they were so they knew each other before this movie. They were in a play together as they were both auditioning for Ferris Bueller. And the way that I heard this told, years later, is that they were on stage during a performance, and like Ferris's character in the play has like a notebook or whatever, and like while on stage during the performance, he writes down, "I got Ferris Bueller," and shows it to Alan Ruck while they're on stage and stuff. And that's how he told him that he got the role. And Alan Ruck was just like kind of thrilled that there was a second role that he could take on in the movie as Cameron. Which honestly, like, yes, Ferris is like cool and iconic, but like Cameron is the main character of this movie, right?
Oh yeah, Cameron is. I mean, I wouldn't say that he's the main character, but I think he's the heart of the movie for sure. He has
the arc. Ferris doesn't really have much of an arc, and Cameron has like
I do think that Ferris is still the main character because he is the person who implements the change in Cameron. He is the impetus for Cameron's arc by taking him out, showing him, hey, life is pretty freaking cool if you go out and experience it. Let me take you on a great day. And, I can see the argument for Cameron being the main character. He definitely has the more interesting arc.
Mm-hmm. I think Ferris doesn't really have an arc, but I think the movie is very smart at your perception of Ferris does have an arc. Like at the beginning, he's the smart talking kid, but he's like, to some extent, you're like, oh, this guy, he's cool, but he's also kind of a dick, and by the end, you really, really like him, and you understand, the meaning behind his actions that isn't just, oh, I want to have fun.
It's interesting you say that because, I've seen this, I can't tell you how many times, and I can't tell you how young I was when I first saw it. So I don't really remember what it was like seeing this for the first time, but you just saw it for the first time, right?
It was my second time.
Second time, okay. But, like, what you're saying there is, like, him kind of bullying Cameron, for lack of a better word, in the first act plays a lot differently when you've seen the whole movie.
Yes.
And so, but I guess I forget that. I take that for granted because I don't think he ever comes off as a dick. I think that, like, we're going to cover this later, but I think it's a very non-cynical movie, non-mean-spirited movie, which makes it unique among particularly 80s comedies. But I guess you're right,
since
though.
The cool kid isn't mean, which is usually a trope in movies, that the cool kid is kind of a bully sometimes.
Exactly, yeah. But, I mean, to your point, Hugo, like, it does come off a certain way, his treatment of Cameron. But, like, I don't know. I've known how it ends for so long that it reads differently for me. But, I mean, walk me through that. How does that come across as a person who's not familiar with the story?
At the beginning, I think he comes off as kind of just like a bit of a snarky, egotistical guy. Just because he's like, it seems in the beginning of the movie that he's trying to get Cameron out of bed, not because he wants Cameron to join him and have fun together, but because Cameron has a car, and he needs to drive me around, so I want to have fun, and I need to use him in order to have fun. And even the whole scene with the sister where they're bickering and she gets annoyed at the beginning of the movie. You're kind of on her side too, because like you see her perspective of why does he get away with everything and I'm just forced to go to school? Like this is messed up.
Especially if you are a sibling who has been in that situation where, like, how does the other sibling always get away with this stuff? Like, I was not. My brother was a perfect angel. I was the one who got away with everything. and
then by the end, your perspective on him changes in the same way that Jeannie's perspective on him to some extent changes. So I think in that sense, it uses the other characters to change the way you see him, which substitutes the fact that he's a stationary character and doesn't have an arc.
Well, I also think that maybe I'm giving the movie too much credit because I've seen it and I know where it's going, but like I think he does kind of throw in just enough little asides during those Cameron scenes where that kind of explains where he's coming from, where he says, Cameron's wound up too tight, he can't go to college like this, his roommate will kill him, he needs to, if anyone needs a day off, it's Cameron, that kind of stuff.
And I mean, like, when I say he comes off as kind of a dick, I mean, I still like him. It's not that I don't like him, but I understand the perspective of the other characters, how they can be annoyed by the way that he acts. I think that's what I'm saying.
He's a lovable dick.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I also think that Jennifer Grey in that opening scene, while it's understandable, like while I do understand that this is where her motivation is coming from, is like seeing him get away with it, I also think her reaction is far too over the top.
Oh yeah.
So like I'm still on his side. I'm not really on her side. When she just sees him get out of going to school, and she reacts to this by saying, "That's it. I want out of this family." I'm like, Jeannie, take a chill pill and be more like Ferris.
I think the implication is that Ferris does this all the time. And
no, I get that.
Yeah,
I get
straw
that.
Breaks the camel's back for Jeannie.
Yes,
but at the same time, what you're saying, Josh, is true, because like by the end of the movie, the point of her character is like she needs to chill and kind of get it more and relax a little bit, so she isn't as uptight as she is at the beginning of the movie. But yeah, yes, Grizz.
I just wanted to comment once more on Cameron, on Alan Ruck, as far as the casting. Like, it's hard for me to not see Matthew Broderick as Ferris Bueller, but it's impossible for me to picture anyone else in the role of Cameron here. He has the perfect face to play this character. His face has this just sort of a melancholy look to it, and it's perfect. And it makes it so that when you see Cameron finally be uplifted a little bit, it really just like radiates out of him. It is fantastic. I think it's a very underrated aspect of the movie.
I agree. Yeah, and I think we'll talk about Cameron more in a second, I think, but like I said, like he has the arc, and it's interesting to see. It kind of sneaks up on you a little bit. At least it sneaks up on me, especially someone who's seen this so many times. But like in the first 20 minutes, he's facilitating the prank phone call to Ed Rooney to get Sloane, Ferris's girlfriend, out of school, where he pretends to be Sloane's dad, and he gets to like tell off Ed Rooney and like call him an asshole and that kind of stuff, and like he's able to speak up for himself and like speak like that to authority figures, but only as somebody else. Yeah. Only when he's playing a role disguising himself can he actually stick up for himself and talk to people like that, which I think is interesting, because that's like kind of where he's headed throughout the rest of the movie, is being able to speak his mind like that.
And it's one of many times of the movie, I think, as you said, it kind of plants little elements of what he's going through that is going to then eventually, builds up and comes out in his, big emotional scene. And I think the movie's really good at doing that, while maintaining a lighthearted tone anyway. It's
yeah, well, to that point, one of my favorite bits of like non-dialogue comedy in any movie really is when Cameron is in his car debating whether or not to go. And he gets out, storms out of his car, and the camera holds on just like his empty car seat, and then you see him walk around the back out of focus behind the car. Beat of like 3 or 4 seconds. Again, really good comedic timing. And then he storms back into the frame in the back, still out of focus behind the car, and like throws a tantrum.
That's one of those things that I'm talking about with the deceptive cinematography. That's brilliant. Yeah, that they held on the seat. That's a good choice. It's so good.
I mean, it's a great choice to hold on to the seat, but also, again, it's great comedic timing. He's gone for just long enough.
Yeah.
And then he goes back into the frame inevitably. And he's
so just freaking out, and you see him like kind of blurry in the background. It's so funny. It's so funny. We'll get to our favorite. I have a section in the outline that is like our favorite comedy bits and the funniest bits of the movie. Okay, so we've talked about just general impressions of the movie as a whole, but the next section in the outline is something you added, Josh. Is where does this movie stand, sort of in the in the realm of the 80s
movies of its ilk?
Yeah.
Yes.
The 80s teen high school movies.
80s teen high school movies. So mostly John Hughes stuff, but also Cameron Crowe wrote a few of them if you want to include his kind of thing. Do you think of the movies of this ilk, is this Ferris Bueller's Day Off the best and or most beloved and or most enduring and or most relevant today, 30 plus years later? What do you guys think?
I think the question of is a little different than should it be. And I think it should be the most enduring, most beloved, but I don't think that it is. I think that Breakfast Club and 16 Candles always come up, more in terms, and I think in large part because they are more focused on the drama aspect of high school movies. And I think that, for a lot of people, that's what makes a good high school movie, is capturing the angst that you felt in high school. And, you don't get as much of that, I think, from Ferris Bueller because it's so fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I try. The reason I ask that is because I don't want to project my own experience onto everyone else. Because for me, it is the best, most enduring, most relevant. Because like I came to it young. I came to Ferris Bueller long before it came to 16 Candles. I still haven't seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High or Say Anything, and I haven't seen a lot of the other John Hughes movies. But like I got to Ferris Bueller very early, and it felt ubiquitous immediately. It felt like everyone I knew could talk about this movie in familiar terms and like knew all the references and that kind of thing, more so than 16 Candles. Maybe not more so than The Breakfast Club, but I want to hear what Hugo has to think, particularly as a non-American perspective. But I also I was just trying to take my own experience out of it and just try to think about this in the most empirical terms I can, which is it's only going to get you so far. But like for example, Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, Ferris Bueller and Breakfast Club are the two best reviewed movies of the 80s comedies. And in terms of IMDb, their rankings, so user rankings, again, it's about Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller are roughly even, but they're the two stand above the rest. And then in box office, again, this and Breakfast Club made more money than any of the other John Hughes movies for anything he ever did. It's using numbers, you can kind of say maybe Ferris Bueller and Breakfast Club are the most enduring, but it's also just a personal experience. What do you see around you, Grizz? What do you got?
I just wanted to say, it's certainly a more quotable movie than the other ones, and I think that's part of why it might appear to be the more popular. And like you said, it is really popular. But I don't know. I almost think that Ferris Bueller, while it is a high school movie, I think because it's so much more about just going out and having a crazy day, it kind of exits the genre a little bit in my mind. Into more just wacky comedy than the high school drama. So the quintessential high school movie for me is probably Breakfast Club, but which one am I going to want to watch on any given day of the week? Ferris Bueller every time.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to limit ourselves to just discussions of 80s high school movies. I'm really talking about of the John Hughes canon and the things that are like John Hughes canon, so the Cameron Crowe stuff as well. And it's tough to have this conversation because it's tough to talk about. It's tough to imperialize iconography, how iconic something is, and talk about those in empirical terms. But Hugo, what do you think?
For me, outside of just the outside perspective of not being American, it having gotten to these movies a little later, because I was born 10 years after this movie was made, so I didn't grow up with it. But this movie felt way more relatable and relevant to me than most of the 80s comedies that I've seen, just because it kind of moves away from the stereotyping and the character archetypes that you see in a lot of teen comedies. There's the jock, there's the bully, this movie is kind of fluid with that stuff. There's very few characters, and it's more about, it kind of does transcend the high school genre in a sense, because it is more about these three characters being young, and I think the overall theme of the movie is that quote that we say at the beginning, and I think in that sense it's way more enduring for a modern contemporary audience that hasn't grown up with the 80s movies than those movies would be. When I watched Breakfast Club, I was 23 years old, and I was like, yeah, I see this, but this is very far away from my experience, both culturally and timing wise, just because I don't know, I went to high schools in the 2000s, and the stereotypes that they're talking about, not only are they American, but they're just kind of not as relevant anymore. So I do agree that maybe Breakfast Club is the quintessential high school movie of the 80s, but I do think Ferris Bueller is way more relevant and enduring as seen today.
To briefly defend Breakfast Club, I agree that that wasn't my experience,
I liked Breakfast Club,
and it wasn't your experience either, but Breakfast Club felt like a heightened version of my experience. My experience was actually nothing like that, but I can still see enough of my experience in that movie, I think, which I think is what makes it good. So the reason I'm asking all this is if this is one of the best, most relevant, one of the most iconic of movies of this ilk, why? What sets it apart? And you guys both kind of just said it, that it transcends a high school movie, so maybe it's not even fair to compare this to Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and St. Elmo's Fire and stuff, but I had a couple other ideas for at least why I respond to this more than I respond to 16 Candles, for example. You kind of referenced it earlier, but the fact that this is like not cynical, like it's very funny, but it's not cynical and it's not mean spirited. And when the comedy is at someone's expense, it's at Ed Rooney's expense, and he's kind of a dick. Yeah. Or it's at the expense of the person, the maitre d' at the restaurant, who, again, is kind of a dick.
Yeah.
And the comedy sometimes at the expense of Jeannie, his sister, who, again, is kind of a dick. So, like, it's always like, I don't know, the person that you don't mind being the butt of a joke is the butt of the joke. But otherwise, it's like, especially compared to comedies, especially compared to 80s comedies, it's like sneakily a nice movie and like not mean-spirited, not cynical. And like, again, Grizz, as you said, as someone who's like a cool high school kid, completely not cynical and completely earnest and nice. And I think that's important. At least that's what I certainly respond to.
I completely agree. Ferris Bueller is the kind of person that you wish was the most popular kid in your high school. Because
absolutely,
the most popular kid in my high school was a jock, who got to date the cheerleaders and didn't talk to us nerds, right? The guy I'm thinking of wasn't mean to me on any occasion or anything like that, but he certainly wasn't going out of his way to be friendly with everybody. Ferris Bueller is friends with the freshmen. He's friends with the athletes. Everybody cares about Ferris. Save Ferris, right? And
they all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
They think he's a righteous dude.
So I think you're also hitting another thing. That's another thing I have on the outline is it's wish fulfillment. You just framed it as everyone wishes that their most popular kid in their high school was Ferris Bueller. I think it's also wish fulfillment that like I wanted to be this guy when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old watching this. I definitely wanted to be him. But also like a third way is wish fulfillment is like who doesn't want to be able to just like shirk their responsibilities for a day and like go to have this day that he has. Honestly, when in the first 5 minutes when he opens up his curtains and says, how could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like today? And it's like the nicest day out you've ever seen in your life.
You're in.
I thought of that every single day I was in school from like middle school on. If it was a nice day outside, I had that exact thought in my head. And even now that I'm like, I work a desk job. I walk in my building and like, it's so nice out. I'm like, how could I possibly be expected to handle work on a day like today? Like, I don't know, man. Like that gets me every time. I still think about that to this day.
It's timeless for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we touched on it, but it's just lovely. It's just a good time, and it also like it's sneakily smart and has interesting things to say. I think, which we'll get into. Even though like the message is kind of simple, but so universal that it's very hard to watch this movie and not feel uplifted.
I think the themes and the arcs kind of hide in plain sight, but they do sneak up on you, and they're well placed. Yeah.
And as I said, it's a fun movie that anyone can enjoy, and if you notice the elements of it that are really good, it's kind of elevated beyond just the regular. This is a fun time comedy. I think, which I think is why it's so enduring. Let's get into spoilers and talk about the rest of the plot.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to talk kind of relatively quickly about what happens in the rest of the movie, and you can stop me and we can discuss different sections, and then I have some like themes and characters and funny moments to talk about later. Basically what they do is they sneak Sloane out of school in a hilarious sequence. Yes, Josh? I'm
already gonna stop you.
Oh, yeah. Is it so funny?
I want to say that. Well, honestly, every scene with Ed Rooney at the high school is my favorite Ed Rooney bits. Like Ed Rooney throughout this movie is funny, but like from the time he calls Ferris's mom to confirm that Ferris is in his school to the time that they pick up Sloane from him, like that, like 20 minutes of Ed Rooney at the high school with his secretary Grace is. I quote it all the time. Anytime in my family, the number 9 comes up, someone has to say 9 times. 9 times. And anytime, for some reason, the name Grace comes up, someone has to yell, Grace!
Yeah.
I think that got gated by your mic, but he screamed
Grace
really loud.
Grace! Grace!
It's so good.
It's so good. And like,
also, when Rooney is walking down the hallway later, and like he runs between the doors, but then he has to walk and look really,
Yeah,
I did that in middle school. I took Ed Rooney's trick.
And like even when they're outside with Sloane and Rooney is giving her this like serious talk, like, oh, you know,
he's a funeral director. Yeah,
you're gonna be okay.
Director, yeah.
It's gonna be fine. Yeah. And she's just like, thanks, Mr.
Between
Rooney.
grief and nothing, I choose grief. Great.
It's so good. She doesn't get to do a lot in the movie, but every time she opens her mouth, she's hilarious, I think. And she's just, I don't know, she's like a fun girl you want to hang out with, as are all of the characters in the movie. And then the scene ends where she walks up to Ferris dressed as her dad, with Cameron's dad's Ferrari,
and they just
daddy? And they just full on make out in the middle of the road, and
Rooney's like, oh, so that's how it is in their family. Like that's a thing.
I guess that's what they do.
But that's also what tips him off that like something is amiss. And from then on, he trusts
From then on, he's.
I also want to touch on just because it's one of the most iconic things in the movie, and we kind of breezed past it a little bit. The roll call at the school, when we first discover that Ferris is
with Ben Stein.
Ben Stein.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know anything about Ben Stein, Hugo.
I don't.
Ben Stein.
Really?
I mean, this is his most iconic movie role, but Ben Stein was a speechwriter for Richard Nixon.
Oh my God! What?
I know, right? Like, and he's like Mensa level intellect, super genius. He had a show for a long time called "Win Ben Stein's Money," and it was just a trivia contest, and Ben Stein almost never lost.
Yes.
So like,
and he was also the spokesperson for Clear Eyes, the eye drops.
You should look up those commercials.
Clear Eyes is awesome. Yeah, he delivers in the same drawl that he has in this movie. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Ben Stein, absolutely iconic, and I think that's the most quoted thing in the movie.
Easily, yes.
Bueller.
Yes.
And so I didn't want us to breeze past that because, like, even though no one is named Bueller, anytime someone is not present, someone is going to say Bueller.
Every time. Like, it's the point that, like, I kind of don't like the joke anymore because I've heard it enough times in, like, corporate settings, for example, if, like, we're on, like, a telecon or something like that. Like, yeah, it's trickled down to every level of the culture that everyone makes that reference. 100%.
That's Ben Stein. Go ahead, Hugo.
And we also get the hilarious scene where he's just talking about history or economics, and you get
voodoo economics.
Yeah, when you talk about the class just
I have a fun fact on that.
Staring into the camera, it's amazing.
Fun fact on that was John Hughes just asked him to talk about something he knows.
There was no script there.
No script, and so Ben Stein, having being a super
class, anyone
goes on this
raised or lowered, raised. The cost of tariffs. Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Yes. And that was all off the cuff, just Ben Stein giving a lecture on something that he knows about. And it's freaking perfect.
Amazingly boring lecture. And just the way he delivers is amazingly boring. Yeah, so good.
Okay, so after that, they were supposed to only take the car to pick up Sloane. That's what Ferris told Cameron, but actually he's driving, so he just drives off to downtown Chicago.
Well, they got to get into the city somehow.
Yeah. And so they spend the rest of the day in Chicago just hanging out, having fun. What they do is they go to Chicago's highest building or whatever it's called.
The Sears Tower.
It's the world's tallest building at the time.
Oh, interesting. Oh, yeah. At the time they do say that in the movie. Yeah, I missed that. The world's tallest building at the time, and then they go to a baseball game. They visit the Art Institute of Chicago, and throughout this,
go to a fancy restaurant.
They go to a fancy restaurant, which is another hilarious sequence. But throughout this, the film kind of cuts back and forth between them in Chicago, just having a fun time, and Rooney looking for Ferris Bueller and trying to figure out where he is.
And Jeannie. Also trying to
nail Ferris because she gets annoyed at the school because some kids just walk up to her with like a can of Coke or whatever, saying, "Oh, do you want to donate some money from Ferris Bueller? I heard it appears he needs
a kidney transplant." Yeah,
and she just like throws the can because she's so mad, and she decides to leave school as well to look for him. Amazing. Amazing stuff.
Do we want to talk about these things in order, or just shout out like favorite?
Yeah. Just go for it.
Okay, shout out. Yeah.
Well, because before they go on all these great adventures in Chicago, they have to drive the Ferrari and park it somewhere. So they take it to the parking garage, and they leave the guy. And I just love the whole delivery there. He's like, "Relax, man. I'm a professional," And then
they leave the car
throughout the rest of the movie.
Garage,
they cut like they're cutting between all these things, and they also occasionally cut back to this guy from the garage attendant and another garage attendant who have taken the car on a joyriding.
And the Star Wars music cue is also one of my favorites in the movie.
Honestly, this is my favorite Star Wars reference in a movie, bar none. Like, it's so good.
The references we see, just like, do we open on the slow-mo of the car, or do we open on the road?
On the street.
It's on the street, okay. And the music starts, and you recognize it.
The Star Wars music starts, and then above us, as if it was a Star Destroyer, the car kind of moves over the camera. Again, exactly like a Star Destroyer. And then we see the slow-mo joyride faces of the two car attendants. We got to back up and say that maybe the running theme of this is that, of the whole movie, is that, Ferris bullies Cameron to take his dad's car out, even though his dad knows the mileage of the car and spent a year restoring this very rare Ferrari they only made 100 of, and he never drives it. He only rubs it with a diaper. And so, like, he's going to know that Cameron took the car out, and Cameron does not want to take the car out because his father will kill him, but Ferris makes him anyway. And so then Cameron is very protective of the car throughout the rest of the movie. So he does not want to leave it with this gas station attendant because he's afraid something will happen to it. And then he's proven entirely correct because they take it for a joyride and put 150 miles on it.
And like Ferris is like, "Oh, don't worry about it. These guys are professional," and it just gives them a $5 bill, and they're like, "They'll take care of it," and they just drive off. It's so good. And like the scene where they get back to the garage after they had the whole day. We'll get into some bits of their day in Chicago, but when they come back to the garage and the camera is still on them talking about their day. And in the background, we see, this is what I mean where this movie is so cool, the way it's shot and the way it does visual comedy. In the background, we see the two, garage employees driving the car back to them. And they do a little loop and then they take it to them as if they had just taken it. It's so funny.
I think you might be mixing up a couple of bits there. I think when they first take the car away, and like Ferris is trying to reassure Cameron, like, it's fine, it'll be fine here, it'll be safe. And like as they walk out of the garage, start to walk down the street, behind them you see the car pull out,
and both times.
It's both.
Yeah, when they bring the car back, they bring the car around the side, and you see it coming in, and then you see the other guy jump out of the car, and then the original garage attendant pulls the car up, and is like, "Here's your car."
Apologize, I didn't watch this week. I guess I've missed that part of the time I watched it.
It's so funny to me, that scene.
This is a movie. This is a good time to say it. This is a movie where it's certainly worth rewatching so that you can focus on background details, because there's so much visual comedy for things that are occurring in the backgrounds of shots.
Yeah. So I think where the movie it begins, everything's fun. We're having fun. It's a fun time, and I think during the museum scene is the first time where the movie kind of stops for a second and has more of a meditative moment. The characters are just standing in front of art at the Art Institute of Chicago, and music plays in the background, and they're just experiencing this place. There's no dialogue. They're just standing there, and especially Cameron. Cameron, as we said, is the heart of the movie, and he has a scene alone where he stares at this painting, very famous painting, by the way. And I think this is another moment where the movie is kind of sneakily letting you know that Cameron is going through some stuff, and he's not just out having fun. But yeah, so I really like that museum sequence because I think it's really well constructed in the sense that it's put in the perfect spot where the movie does need to slow down for just a second and let you kind of live in what's happening for a minute.
Do you remember what happens right before that scene? I don't remember. I remember what happens right after. The parade scene's right after that. But what happens right before that scene?
Was that the restaurant?
I think it's the restaurant.
It might be the restaurant, yeah. Can we talk about the restaurant?
Yeah, let's talk about the restaurant.
Let's talk about the restaurant.
I love the restaurant scene. Well, again, I think him fooling the maitre d' is again among my favorite bits, and also among the most quotable parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Abe Froman, Sausage King Chicago is a great reference, an enduring reference, at least in my life. I don't know about your life, Grizz, but
no, I
make that reference a lot.
I have a lot of family that live in Chicago, and that's been a joke. Like when we go into restaurants, like a table for 10 for Abe Froman, you know.
And if you're listening, you won't be able to see me do this, but if you're watching, I love the way that the maitre d', the way his eyes go up when he says, "The Sausage King of Chicago," when he delivers that line, as if he's already rolling his eyes at the fact that this kid could be Abe Froman. Everything this guy says is quotable to me. Please leave, or I have to get snooty. Snooty. Snotty.
As if he wasn't already extremely snooty from the start.
Oh, go ahead. Call the police. This will be a hoot.
I want to shout out the casting on here. I don't know the name of the actor, but
no idea.
Again, they do such a great job of casting people who look the part. Do you think they told him, hey, get a really a pencil thin mustache? You got to have.
I'm sure that was
slick back.
I'm sure that was a choice. Yes.
So good. Yes. I was thinking maybe that's just his life. That's who he is.
Could be. Yeah. They just found a guy in a hidden camera situation. They didn't even know he was making a movie. Yeah. It's just like that. And then he runs to his dad in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Which
first time.
Yes. I also love that Ferris is giving a direct-to-camera address about the Ferrari and how driving it is so choice.
So choice.
If you ever have the means, I highly recommend picking one up. And then the second he walks out of the bathroom, his father comes out of the stall. So
yeah,
I don't know what to make of that. In the reality of the movie, is he not actually talking to the camera because otherwise his dad would have heard him? I don't really know.
No, he's not.
That's not the point.
I like how the movie actually doesn't care about complete realism. There are several times where the movie, aside from just the fourth wall breaks, but even the parade scene is ridiculous. The song starts and suddenly there's this flash mob of people walking downstairs. They have a choreography ready for that specific song. It's it's amazing. Or again, we talked about the sound effects, but the scene where he's running, we'll get to it, but there's a sound effect where he does a hard a sharp turn and you hear tires screeching on the floor as if it was the movie does stuff like that.
Well, that's also cross-cutting between a car being driven home. So, you kind of defensively, they're doing a thing there, but it's funny that
and I think the way the movie doesn't care all the time about being completely realistic makes it funnier.
Yeah.
So
speaking of not realistic, but a good physical bit is at the restaurant as they're leaving. They sneak into his father's cab basically behind his back, and just again it's a good bit of physical comedy where they're trying to sneak into the cab while his back's turned, then he turns around and they have to move, then he turns around again and they have to get in the cab. But I also love that little bit right before that where he says the meat get pinched, the bolt survive, then all three of them snap as they
and they put on really dark glasses. It's amazing. Yeah, so funny.
4,000 restaurants in this downtown Chicago area. I picked the one that my father goes to.
And then while they're in the cab, they are stuck in traffic at one point, and next to him is another cab with his father. And this is the first time that his father kind of looks at him and he sees him see him. And what is cool here is that the camera goes to his father, then it moves to Ferris, then it moves back to his father that sees Ferris, and then it moves, without cutting it, moves back, and suddenly it's just Sloane wearing glasses. And there's no one there, and they and you see them that they slouch down on the floor on the cab. It's another great moment of really good physical and visual comedy, which I think this film doesn't get
totally agree
enough. Because it's so quotable, there's so many funny lines that I think the actual visual comedy of this film kind of gets lost in that discussion.
I agree.
Yeah. In the meantime, Rooney is trying to look for Ferris Bueller. I think the first time that he leaves the school is another moment that had me laughing so much, because you see the car and the slow move, and the camera is showing the tires of the car, and is very kind of almost film noir
stylistic
in its style, and there's
and
this
the music.
Jazzy soundtrack going on, as if he's this big shot detective looking for this kid. And he goes to this bar to see if Ferris Bueller is hanging out in this bar,
like an arcade thing.
Yeah, and he's talking to the attendant at the bar, because he sees a girl dressed exactly like Ferris Bueller from behind, and he walks up to her and turns out it's not him, so she throws his drink in his
says some really
face.
Inappropriate things.
Yeah, it's And then
particularly inappropriate because it's not Ferris, because it's a random woman.
Yes.
That makes it more inappropriate. Yes.
Yeah, it's really weird, but funny. And then he walks up to the bar, and the person there is they just start talking about baseball because there's baseball on TV. And then while he's not looking, the camera has him in the shot, but you can see in the background the TV, and Ferris Bueller just shows up on camera because he catches a baseball.
Caught a foul ball, yeah.
Great scene. So after that, Rooney, tries several times to sneak into Ferris's house because he wants to catch him in the act of not being sick at home. But he fails miserably. He gets attacked by the dog. He, his foot gets stuck in mud and he loses a shoe. Like, it's a whole thing. Then eventually he does manage to sneak into the house, but he doesn't know that Jeannie has also come back to the house. And this is another really hilarious sequence where Jeannie thinks there's a burglar that has sneaked into the house.
Well, she thinks that Ferris is upstairs. Yes. He thinks that Ferris is downstairs, and they approach each other from the opposing corners, thinking they're about to find Ferris, and then they are surprised to find each other.
Yeah,
and she kicks him in the face.
Straight up kicks him in the face and knocks him out.
I do think it's interesting that she didn't immediately recognize her high school principal.
Yeah, didn't recognize her principal, yeah.
I mean, it still would have been a reasonable reaction to scream, because why is your principal in your kitchen?
But she then calls the police and tries to get the police to the house to because there's a burglar there.
Yeah,
and she's very rude to the person on the phone.
And then the police pick her up and bring her to the station, because in the meantime, Rudy wakes up and he sneaks out of the house and they don't find anyone. No. And then we get a funny scene with Charlie Sheen at the police station, which another just hilarious scene. In the meantime, they go to pick back the car from the garage, and they're
hold on. Parade
scene. I was missing the parade scene.
Well, also, can I talk about the Charlie Sheen scene here real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think this is an important scene, more important than it looks at a surface level, because this is the moment where Jeannie starts having fun.
Yes.
And that, I think, is what sets her up for what she ultimately does at the end of the movie, is that she is having this conversation where she's uptight and tense, and this drug-addled Charlie Sheen, way too on the nose.
But, this is before that, So it's, it's on the nose in retrospect.
The fun fact on this was apparently, in order to get his appearance just right, Charlie Sheen stayed up for 48 hours before shooting this scene.
So that his eyes would be red.
His eyes would be red. He'd look completely drug-addled.
Yeah. Yes.
But he has this conversation and basically, convinces Jeannie that she needs to lighten up.
Yeah. Maybe you have a problem with your brother is really a problem that you have with yourself or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember what he says, but that's basically the message she walks away from, maybe a new perspective.
Yeah, and so I think that while this does just look like a silly scene where and maybe this is, with hindsight, we're all very aware of Charlie Sheen, superstar. Maybe at the time this movie first came out, Charlie Sheen was less of a superstar. I know he had done some stuff already.
But yeah, I mean, Platoon comes out this year, and he's the star of Platoon.
Right.
So if he's not already a big star, he will be in a few months.
But so, I was just thinking, maybe it's the hindsight that makes me think, focus so much on this being sort of a cameo, because but in reality, it probably wasn't as much a cameo. And in that regard, because I'm looking at it as a cameo, sometimes it's hard to internalize, there's actually something important happening here. Regardless, let's go to the parade.
So Cameron is annoyed, despite the fact that, they're having a good time. He's still annoyed at Ferris because he believes that Ferris is kind of using him for the car and to just have a good time. And he's annoyed that, Ferris gets away with everything, but my dad is going to kill me when I get back.
At the start of the parade scene, he's walking with Sloane. He's annoyed because Ferris disappeared. And they don't know where he is.
Disappeared as well, yes.
And so he's kind of extrapolating Ferris being missing as he's yanking my chain. Mm-hmm. We got to get this car home, and he's not even around right now. So so he's kind of venting the fact that they can't find him. And then where is Ferris?
And then Ferris somehow sneaks up on a float on the parade. I'm not sure what the parade is for exactly. I think I have it on the outline, but it's something that I wasn't familiar with, to do with the city of Chicago, I guess. But Ferris somehow managed to sneak on a float in the parade, and then he just starts lip syncing and dancing to to Dankeschön, and then they do Twist and Shout by the Beatles. And I don't know, this scene is just so joyous because all of the people in the parade join into him, and he's like at the center of attention. It kind of reminds me of the scene in Back to the Future where Marty McFly is playing on stage. It's kind of a similar vibe.
100%. It's a lot like that, where it's like,
yeah,
this guy's getting way more credit than he probably actually deserves for the performance.
Again, it breaks the realism of actual reality, but within the movie, it's kind of a heightened reality, and it's just awesome. It's fun. It makes you feel good.
And speaking of like, kind of, you mentioned the museum scene. Like, it's superfluous is the wrong word, but like it's a nice little kind of break from the action to like let us breathe for a second.
Yes,
I think Twist and Shout's the same way.
Yeah,
because like during Donk and Shane, like we do cut to Cameron and Sloane like having a conversation about like their lives, their futures, Ferris, etc. But like once Twist and Shout starts, like that's just 2.5 minutes of like the Beatles playing and people dancing and having a great time. And it is such a great time.
It is a great time.
Yeah, exactly. It's a music video.
The construction worker that you see dancing up on one of the high rises, he was not an extra in the movie. That was just a construction worker working in Chicago that was getting really into it.
John Hughes saw him dancing, so said, point a camera up there, and he did. Yeah.
So cool.
It's so cool. And like, even when they cut to Ferris's dad in his office, just seeing the parade and doing a little twist, like,
I also love after the sequence. Oh, well, obviously when Ferris first appears in the float, Cameron and Sloane are both like, Ferris, get off the float. Yeah. What are you doing? And then afterwards, they're like, you're nailed for sure, man. You're nailed. And Ferris is like, who do I know would be at a parade? Like, who's gonna bust me in a parade? You know, like,
and who's gonna believe that I was in a parade?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Who am I? Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
great stuff.
Another one of the I think underappreciated things from this parade scene is the fact that they sang Donkashane, because this song has come up multiple times already in the movie. Multiple characters are humming or singing this song throughout the movie, so it's actually kind of a comedic through line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most notably, when Ferris takes his shower in the opening scene, he sings Donkashane into his shower head, basically. And I'm pretty sure I learned that they shot that opening scene where he fakes out his parents and gives like that whole monologue to camera. That they shot that very late in the schedule, so they had already shot the parade scene. So like they were doing a lot of callbacks that aren't yet callbacks as they film that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Jeannie also hums it for a second
she
after
sings it as
she's
after her
Sheen.
Conversation with Charlie Sheen, and Rooney is humming it when he rings the doorbell for the first time at the house. I just think that's one of those things. It's like, having watched this 1,000 times, I picked up on that eventually, rather than it just being like the big moment on the parade. It's like, oh no, they were setting all this up.
Yes.
So they pick the car back up, and initially everything's fine. Like, even Cameron has lightened up a little bit. Like, they're having fun. They're driving back, and then Ferris sees how many miles have been added to the
there was less than 200 at the start of the day.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact number, but now there's like close to 400, right?
No, I think it was 2,000 something, and it ends up over 3,000. So the dad would notice because it went from 2 to 3. I think that was the difference. Yeah. And we get this just amazing scene where Cameron sees the number and just goes completely catatonic, and the scream that he does, the camera comes out of his mouth screaming, and then it cuts to like just landscape shots of Chicago. Classic, and you hear the echo of his.
That's cartoon shit, but I love it.
It's so funny.
Well, and,
it's so funny.
It's one of those things that it's hard for me to. I know that they probably weren't the first to do this, but it's like,
absolutely not.
Were modern cartoons referencing Ferris Bueller, or are they referencing the other cartoons? And I don't know anymore.
I'm assuming that cartoons did this long before Ferris.
No. I mean, I'm saying, I know this was a thing that occurred before Ferris Bueller, but now when I see it referenced in newer things, I have to ask myself: is this referencing Ferris Bueller or referencing a cartoon?
And so
probably the latter. Yeah.
And so Cameron goes catatonic for a while. We get a great scene where they're just hanging out, and he's just lying down on some wall, and Sloane is trying to pick him back up, and this is where Ferris explains the theme of the movie. This is where he gets vulnerable, I think, for the first time, because throughout the movie he's this cool guy who gets away with everything, But in this scene, he's like, I did this in part for Cameron. Because I want him to lighten up. I want him to have a good time. And at the same time, even for me, we're graduating high school.
We're not going to see each other again, yeah.
Yeah, we're graduating high school. We'll have the summer, but, after that, it's over. Which, isn't necessarily true.
Maybe a little short-sighted, yeah.
But it might be how you feel when you're 18 years old and you're just graduating and you're just going to move to another city and, not seeing your friends for a year because you're off at university feels like, the longest time when you're 18, So, and I think this is where, the theme of the movie is nailed down. And this is where for me personally, when I fully liked Ferris as a character. Because before I was like, oh, this is a cool guy, but he's also kind of a dick. But in this scene, I'm like, oh, shit, this guy really cares about his friends.
I'm not sure he's necessarily... Well, I guess he is kind of being vulnerable himself, but what I really think he's doing here is kind of explaining the Cameron situation in full. Like, yes, we've seen Cameron's neurotic. Yes, we see that Cameron isn't able to stick up for himself or, stick up to authority figures. But, like, what Ferris is saying here is, like, I think Cameron's been able to get by because I've been around, but I'm not always going to be around. Yeah. And, like, he needs to learn to be able to handle himself when I'm not here. And he does in the next, like, half an hour. Can we talk about the ending? Because we gotta wrap up soon. I want to talk, but I want to talk about the Ferrari scene at the end.
Sure. Let's do it.
Yes. So, I'll just lead us in. So, because there were so many miles put onto the car, they tried to set up the Ferrari on, like, cinder blocks and just run the accelerator in reverse so the miles would come off backwards. But that doesn't work. So Ferris says, well, maybe we can try to take the plastic off the odometer, break open the odometer and move it manually. And Cameron's just kind of had enough at this point. And out of frustration, he kicks the car. Yeah. And he's basically like yelling at his dad as he's kicking the car because he sees that the Ferrari as a symbol of his father's love that has eluded him and instead gone to a car, and that pisses him off. So he kicks it repeatedly until he's kind of working through some stuff until eventually he kicks it and it knocks off the cinder blocks and accelerates out the back of the garage, breaking their big glass garage door and destroying the car. Or as Ferris says, you killed the car. And he did.
Killed the car. The car is dead.
So they all just sit there and look at the destruction they hath wrought. And Cameron decides then and there that he will take the heat for this. He will take the rap for this. He will face his father when he comes home. Ferris offers to take the rap for him and says, you don't want this much heat. Your father hates me anyway. You can blame me for this. Yeah. And Cameron says, no, I will take responsibility. I will face my father. When he gets home, we're going to have a little chat. And it's really nice. And you think that Cameron's going to be okay. At least I think Cameron's going to be okay.
Unless his dad kills him.
And even if his relationship with his father doesn't improve, at least now he's decided I'm gonna stand up for myself. Like
his relationship with himself has improved.
I'm not gonna take it passively and be depressed. If my dad is an asshole, that's not my fault.
And one of my favorite moments is Cameron says to Ferris when he's like saying, "I'll take the rap for this." Cameron says to Ferris like, I knew he's something along the lines of like, I knew this was a possibility ever since I let you take the car out this morning. And Ferris says, I made you take the car this morning. And then Cameron says, I could have stopped you. And then Ferris doesn't say anything back. He just kind of gives him like an impressed look like, oh, really? You could have stopped me. And then Cameron's like, yes, it's not impossible to stop the famous Ferris Bueller. I think that's a good moment. Like, Cameron admitting to Ferris, and like whether or not either of them think this is true, the fact that Cameron says to Ferris, I could have stopped you, but like, you only took the car out because I let you take the car out. Like, that's a good moment.
Yes.
And it kind of recontextualizes, I think, their whole relationship, honestly. And like,
I think it's the moment for me that nails down that these three people genuinely care for each other. And I think that's, part of why the movie is so uplifting and uncynical. Because like these three characters are genuinely good friends and care for each other and want each other to be okay. And, and they just kind of sit there for a moment, not saying anything. And Sloane breaks the ice. She's like, Cameron, you were pretending to be catatonic, but you saw me change out of my clothes before at the pool, and he's like, he just gives her a sly smile, and they laugh. It's like it's a good scene. Good scene. It's a fun scene. So after this, Ferris takes Sloane back home, and then he suddenly realizes, oh my god, my parents are going to be home in like, I don't know what he says, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, or whatever.
Yeah.
So we get the most iconic scene in the movie for me, and maybe the parade, but to me, this is the most iconic scene because it's been quoted in other movies that I like. And particularly Spider-Man Homecoming. They have a scene where he runs through gardens and Ferris Bueller is playing on television.
Family Guy does it.
Yeah.
Spider-Man does it.
Yeah.
A lot of movies
does
do
a
it,
bunch.
yeah.
So basically he starts running through the neighborhood to get back home. And at one point he runs into Jeannie, who's driving her car with her mom.
Jeannie is driving the mom, and the dad is also driving home at the same time. So it's cutting between dad driving home, mom and Jeannie driving home, and Ferris running home.
And Jeannie she's the only one that sees Ferris being out.
Yes.
So they kind of have...
She's got to race home to beat him.
They kind of have a Mexican standoff stare down moment. And then he starts bolting to get home and she starts driving really fast. And, fantastic scene. It's just one of the coolest sequences in the movie. So well shot.
And
funny.
Then the payoff for Jeannie's whole arc is at the end.
She doesn't rat him out,
Well, so Ferris is about to sneak in the door, but Ed Rooney catches him.
Yeah.
And then Jeannie comes out of the house and comes upon Ed busting Ferris, and then she covers for him and pretends that he has been homesick all day, and that he just
he'd gone to the hospital and was walking back from the hospital.
Yes. So she decides to cover for him in that moment. And again, one of my favorite fourth wall breaks is Ferris just looks at the camera like, "Oh wow, cool. This is really happening. Cool," and then goes back to the scene.
That was lucky. And then he runs upstairs and manages to get back into bed before the
and turns off the snoring by hitting it with a baseball. And then he gives you the pose.
And he repeats, I think he repeats the line of...
and he repeats the theme.
Yeah.
The end.
The end, but we also get post-credit scenes that are hilarious, which is Rooney walking to the school bus. And then,
which I think was... Yes. That's cut from the longer version of the movie. Because that actually, it doesn't really make sense that he began on a school bus 6 p.m. at night. That was... just filler they had earlier that they put in the
it's just a funny scene that they put it there. And, and Ferris talking to camera, why are you still here? The movie's over. Just go home.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
I hate to rush us, but I got a hard stop in a few minutes. So do you want to cover one last question and then we rank it? Anything, or do you want to rank it now?
I think
we're just on our final thoughts now, right?
There was
final thoughts?
There was a thing where I was going to say your favorite comedic moments, but I think we touched on a lot of them in our general discussion, so we don't have to go for that. I just wanted to... very super quickly, just say, comedy aside, the movie, I think, gets elevated not only by the visuals, the music, the editing, I think, is fantastic as well. But it also sneakily and lightheartedly has a lot of things to say about teenage anxieties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It talks about...
worrying about your future,
insecurity and about the future and how it's going to affect your friendships and your relationships. Taking high school way too seriously and not being able to just step back.
Taking anything too seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
This
is high school, but it could be applied to anything and just
And
that's
the what makes it
movie
so resonant is that it can apply to anyone and everyone.
Exactly. The overall theme of the movie is life comes at you pretty fast. Sometimes just stop and enjoy yourself. Take
a day off every once in a while.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. And Cameron with the depression and stuff, and standing up for yourself and all that stuff. So that's for me is the final message of the movie. If you guys don't have any final thoughts, we can rank it on our list.
Let's
rank it.
I love this movie. I would put it for sure in the top 5, to be honest, because I think it within its genre and as a comedy, it's one of the best ever. And I'm a big believer of judging things based on their genre and what they're trying to do. So I think it really succeeds at what it sets out to do, and for that reason, I would definitely put it in top 5, maybe top 3.
I completely agree. Like I said, this was my favorite movie of all time for many years. It's still among my top 5 or 10 favorite movies of all time. So, and honestly, like you said, kind of judging it within its genre, there are a few comedies I love more than Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And I know people kind of don't weigh comedy the same way as they weigh dramas like Bicycle Thieves and Chinatown Network, but I kind of want to weigh it the same way, to be perfectly honest. Honestly, I could put this anywhere in the top 5 with a smile on my face. I could defensively put this number 1. I could put it number 5. I don't really know. I think that I'm going to put it at 3. So below Boogie Nights ahead of Network, personally.
This is one of the things that I always think about especially when we're talking about favorite movies, and it's a question that always comes into my head is, if this were on TV, would I start watching it in the middle of the movie?
Oh, it's number one then, by that rubric.
Ferris Bueller, anytime I see it's on, I'm going to watch it, no matter how far into the movie it is, because I know that there's going to be great comedy in whatever part of the movie I'm watching, because it's so prevalent. It's everywhere. And
among the most rewatchable movies of all time.
God, I love Ferris Bueller. So this is such a great movie. I think we're all in agreement that it would be a top 5 for me, for sure. I'd put it above Bicycle Thieves for sure, and I'd put it above Chinatown. I'd put it above Network. I would. Yeah. Honestly, I'd put it number 2.
You know what? I changed my mind. I'm going 2 as well. Yeah, I'm going 2 as well. Sorry, Boogie Nights.
I'm completely
because I liked Boogie Nights, but I love Ferris Bueller, and like again, any time if I had to choose between one or the other to watch, I would choose Ferris Bueller.
100%. I would not be mad about having Ferris Bueller at number 1. Not only do I love this movie, but it's kind of just it just makes our list more fun, because like right now we have fucking Citizen Kane, with all due respect, which is an amazing film, right now the second best movie of all time behind Paddington 2, of course. Yeah. But I genuinely think I would be okay with that.
Real quick, very brief aside, Siskel and Ebert had a TV show in the 80s, 90s where they reviewed movies every week, and then Gene Siskel died, and he was replaced by Richard Roeper, so it was Ebert and Roeper at that point. And people think that show didn't work as well as because Ebert and Roeper had like 2 different tastes. Like, I believe Citizen Kane was one of Ebert's favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
And Richard Roeper, famously, his favorite movie of all time is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So if we go 1, 2, Citizen Kane, Ferris Bueller, then we're basically Ebert and Roeper on this podcast. So.
Well, okay, so
are we gonna? Is it number 2 or number 1? What are we doing?
I mean, okay. Again, the question that I always go to is, which would I rather watch? Of course, I'd rather watch Ferris Bueller over Citizen Kane.
I'm gonna go number 2. I'm gonna be the party pooper and put it number 2.
I'm gonna stick with number 2. It would be irresponsible for us to say that Citizen Kane is worse than Ferris Bueller.
Like, just, take a day off. You don't have to be responsible all the time.
Yeah.
That's what the movie is telling you. Yeah, but I get it. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Number 2 on our film to remember list.
But I want everyone to know just how close we came to rating Ferris Bueller above close. Citizen Kane.
Yeah, speaking of, next week, I think we have a pretty good candidate for potentially,
this next week could also be number 1, I think.
It could be a number 1. I think it's a number 1 candidate for sure. What are we doing next week, Josh?
Next week, we're going to be watching Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme, based on the book by Thomas Harris, and I'm so excited. Because Anthony Hopkins just won his second Best Actor Oscar, and let's talk about when he won his first Best Actor Oscar, which is, I guess, came out 30 years ago. Like, 30 years ago, a couple months ago. So, yeah. Silence of the Lambs.
And
join us.
We have a special guest.
We have a guest as well, right?
Frequently mentioned listener TJ will be a guest to discuss Silence of the Lambs. I'm very excited to hear his thoughts on it.
Me too.
Awesome. We'll see if it sneaks onto number 1. I feel like it could.
It might.
Potentially.
It might.
For the generic promotion things, follow us on Twitter, RTF_pod. And then from there, you'll probably find Hugo, myself, and Josh. And you can follow us as well.
My other podcast that I do is called I'm So Tired. In the next few days, we are going to be... I know, this is a complete non sequitur, but we're going to be recording something about what's going on in Palestine. Islam, who I do the podcast with, is Palestinian. I'm of Jewish heritage. It's very close to home. We care a lot about it. If you want to, have an interesting opinion maybe on that based on our backgrounds, follow us there.
So listen to I'm So Tired with Hugo, and then come back and watch Silence of the Lambs this week.
Hell
and
yeah.
Listen to Remember the Film next week.
And see you next time. Bye.
See you guys.